exciting, right? And then next week we'll jump into Iron Jawed Angels, because you'll watch that this Thursday, and that'll be a recap from Chapter 6 that we talked about last week. And then we'll get into kind of a recap of the whole semester of what we talked about, and any other things we need to talk about before finals. Okay?
What were the, you said there was like something we would have to take the final exam if we had a certain like thing. What was that criteria?
Well, I will send you your grades after you submit your final essay, which is due next Thursday. We're going to do a pretty quick turnaround on grading that, and then once I calculate your grades, I'll send you what your grade is currently without taking the exam. And then I'll also let you know what you would need on the exam to boost a letter grade, and then you can make the decision on if you want to take the final or not. But then I also will let you know if it didn't matter if you made 100 on it, you still wouldn't be able to boost your grade. Then I'll let you know that too. But you still can take it if you want to. But
Is the final cumulative or?
yes, it is. It is cumulative, and I'm pretty sure, yes, it's all multiple choice. And it will be on Canvas, so it will be administered virtually.
I was looking and the final essay instructions are on Canvas. It's the rubric, but it's not like the instructions of what to do.
Really? Okay, I handed it out last week, and I don't have any of those extra copies on me. So I'll double check that, because when I look at Student View, it's saying that you guys can see it, the rubric that I uploaded, but I don't really.
We can see the rubric, but not the instructions of like what to do.
Like the principal thing?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. I have it as a document on there that you should be able to click and see. At least that's what I have on my end. I just need to double check, because it would just be an essay 4, and then kind of like how the other essays are, it's like a Word document that you click and you see. But if that's not there or it's not uploading properly, I'll make sure that's right after class.
I'll look into the files tab. Sometimes stuff appears there.
Yeah, it does. It does. So yeah, that draft will be due next Monday if you want to get feedback from Erin before you submit the final on Thursday. So, and make sure you listen to the lecture. It is different. If you weren't here, it is different than the other essays that you've had in class, and it's worth double the points. So you want to make sure that you follow the rubric and the instructions and read all those specific things. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, well, like I said, today we're going to wrap up kind of our chapter discussion with Chapter 5 that really goes into what is a leadership profile. What does that mean? And the leader that we're going to use to really dive into this content is Norman Borlaug. So you guys should have watched the film that was on YouTube that was within Canvas on Norman Borlaug to complete this worksheet that we'll work through today. So how this will go is that as we kind of cover each area of content that coincides with the question that was asked about Borlaug, I'll just kind of ask you guys what you guys thought based on the film was demonstrated from Borlaug. So, and how this will help you from reading Chapter 5, I hope you guys saw kind of a holistic approach in how to really dive deeper into understanding yourself. It kind of continues to build on that strengths knowledge of being authentic to what you're good at and knowing that, but again, being acknowledging your weaknesses too, maybe not focusing on them, but being acknowledging them, and then just becoming more authentic and comfortable with the natural ways that you tend to lead. So the quote that I want to lead for today is, becoming a leader is synonymous with becoming yourself. It is precisely that simple, and it is also that difficult. So just as this chapter talks about, is that sometimes as you get to know yourself, it is maybe some challenges there to accept who you are and what you're good at, and maybe accept the things that you need to work at that maybe you thought you were already good at. So in the chapter when it talks about the leadership profile, it talks about a couple of components of it. So it kind of gives the example that it's essentially like your toolkit that you go into as a leader, how you naturally tend to lead, what you naturally tend to be attracted to, and it is in these areas of leadership competencies, leadership roles, learning styles, experiences, change styles, and more. And again, we're going to go through some of those areas in reference to Borlaug. So strong leaders are the ones who are being themselves and acting in character as they fulfill their leadership role. So in understanding yourself and getting a deeper understanding of yourself, that allows you to be more authentically you. And it goes back to that strengths concept of that if you understand where your strengths are, then you're not going to be trying to be great at everything and being well-rounded and then leading to being mediocre. So if you know who your authentic self is, then you can lead more naturally in that realm than trying to be everything to everyone when that's not necessarily possible for one person. So how knowing your leadership profile helps you. It helps you if knowing your profile, which is all those different components that make up who you are as a leader. Knowing that helps you understand how your behaviors and how your leadership approaches affect those that are following you, which is extremely important when we're looking at the level of effectiveness that you could have in a leadership role. It also helps you understand your role as being a change agent or being a stimulus for change within a group or within a team or in any of those capacities. So if you truly understand yourself and your leadership profile, those things become a little more clear for you. So the first section that we'll talk about, that we'll jump in with kind of Norman Borlaug, was his first question on leadership competencies. So these are some of the areas of leadership competencies that the book discussed. These are really foundational areas that the author suggests that you should really try to work on if you want to continue to be effective as a leader. So before we jump into Norman Borlaug on kind of that specific question, who was Norman Borlaug? I know a lot of you probably already knew who he was before you watched the film, but who is Norman Borlaug? Yes, he was the father of the Green Revolution. So what all was entailed in the Green Revolution and how they described it? What were some of the accomplishments that Borlaug had during his lifetime? Yes.
Kind of like led technological advances in like the wheat industry specifically to create like greater yielding wheat and wheat that was like resistant to rust and all that to like feed developers countries specifically.
Yes. Yes, he used crossbreeding or cross-pollination in really trying to eradicate the issue of world hunger for people. Do you guys remember the scene in the film that really kind of opened his eyes to the challenges that people have with hunger kind of early in his life? And talked about when he went to Minnesota and he had the opportunity to kind of actually see people who were hungry, and that helped him see that this is a problem, worth trying to solve. So let's start with the first question, because as we go through these, this should help us understand him more as a leader. Again, that profile of deeper who he was and how he interacted with others, and also help us get some insight into why he was such an effective leader and led the world, and really looking at hunger or population growth, not just population growth and food production, but seeing them as something that needs to be looked at together. So, number one, what leadership competencies did Norman Borlaug bring to the table, and how were they seen in action? I'm starting to wonder if y'all watched the film, y'all.
I think number 4, developing others, because of his work developing a center for like there was an intern program and all that, like involved with that center. I can't remember what the center was called.
Mm-hmm.
But that intern program, like that was kind of a neat thing he did, like what he did going instead of just him being a mastermind doing all of it, no one to carry on.
Absolutely. He definitely had a strong interest in developing others, and that was kind of what he viewed, kind of a, I guess, foundational view of how to solve those problems, is that he felt that those farmers needed those practices presented to them in a way that they would want to adopt those changes. And then he saw that they would be able to support themselves. Kind of like when we talked about with Dan West a little bit, with him saying that people aren't just lazy and don't want to help themselves. If they have the information or education or resources, then they will do better. So definitely developing others. What's another one that we saw Borlaug do?
I put communicating well, basically the same things that you just said too, like being able to teach others how to provide for themselves through family.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I said global prostituteness.
Yeah.
Just because of his like diplomatic responsibilities and like needing to foreign policy leaders to like hunger in those countries.
Absolutely. Definitely had a very much worldwide perspective on how those issues should be approached and solved. And even when he had people coming to different areas, making sure that they took or applied the knowledge they were learning to their specific climate and their specific region. For sure. So are there any other leadership competencies critical to his role that are not listed in Chapter 5? Did you guys just think of anything else you didn't see on this list that you think should be seen as a competency for Borlaug? I think something that maybe could be added is a competency that he seemed to demonstrate was his attention to detail and his passion to pay attention to detail, and how he saw that as being more effective in developing solutions, not cutting corners, having the trial set up to where they were covering, and checking each little, I'm not a plant science major, but checking each little part of the crop before pollination. So very much attention to detail. So leadership roles. When the chapter talks about leadership roles, it doesn't necessarily talk about the positions that you've held. It talks about the roles and the parts you played within an organization or a job. So it could be like maybe you weren't the CEO, but you may have been handling a lot of high-level, important things going on in the organization and had to demonstrate some of those specific maybe problem solving or strategists or all those things that maybe someone wouldn't necessarily associate with your role. So what leadership roles did Norman Borlaug play throughout his lifetime? Make sure, those are only just, a couple, but on your, the other side of that worksheet, Also on page 106 and 107, there's that entire list of leadership roles that you could have chosen from to apply to Borlaug. So, what are some of the leadership roles that Norman played throughout his life?
I said advocate.
Which one?
Advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think he was a really big advocate for what he was doing for ag in general.
For sure.
I said problem solver.
Mm-hmm.
He saw a problem and he was like, okay, yeah, do something about it.
Absolutely. Which roles do you think naturally came to him? And which roles do you think he was asked to play? Oh, sorry.
I said, like, the communicator and change agent kind of came naturally to him.
Mhm.
Things that he was used to, he could talk to people, he could communicate the ways that, like, this change would benefit them. And then, I guess, I kind of, like, just matched one up with, I said, like, manager or, like, that area, just because of, like, in his bureaucracy roles, like, he didn't enjoy, like, the paperwork and that side of things, so I feel that kind of, like, fit in with the manager, the more logistics side of business.
Absolutely. I can totally relate to that. And I mean, so many levels. The red tape of things that have to happen to make a business go are so important, but when you're focused on solving whatever it is that your business is geared to solve, you just sometimes rather be doing that than filing taxes. So I can definitely relate to that. How did Borlaug's leadership roles contribute to his clarity or drift in leadership? And it can be either if you want to talk about his clarity that he had, or any area, or any time you thought maybe he experienced drift. Come on, y'all. I don't want to talk at you the whole class, but absolutely. Very good point. Very good example. His ability to approach things as a fixer really gave him laser focus, clarity during his leadership journey. He kind of didn't really seem to have many hiccups. Once he understood what it was he was supposed to do, he tried to just really stay committed to that clear vision. Okay. So talking about the learning styles. When the chapter talks about the learning styles, it gives you kind of 4 different areas and how people just approach learning. And any leader who wants to be an effective leader really should adopt the idea of constantly learning, wanting to continue to evolve. Remember we talked about that. Wanting to continue to evolve over time and continue to learn and grow with different trends and changes and whatever fits for their organization. So action, when it talks about people who have the learning styles of action tactics, those are people who really learn by doing. They kind of take things face on and they want to try to change it. People who use thinking tactics, those people like to kind of think through the process. They like to think through all the different scenarios that could happen and see what's going to be the best route. Feeling tactics, those are people that kind of use their intuition to kind of guide their learning. Then tactics for assessing others. These are people who like to kind of talk to other people maybe who have been through similar experiences or challenges, try to hear what they've learned or what they went through, and then they use that to kind of build on. So for number 3, identify Norman Borlaug's learning tactics. What do you think his learning tactics were, learning styles?
I think like action was a big one.
Mhm.
Like when he thought of people hungry, he wanted to act on it, try to find a way to solve it.
Absolutely. Definitely didn't really seem intimidated by a challenge. Okay. How did his learning style benefit himself and others? How did his, if we're using the tactic of action, how did his action approach benefit those around him?
I think it's kind of like, it's like a symbiotic relationship when you help someone, like you feel good and they feel good too because they've been helped. And you feel good because you've given something that you can, like controlledly and effectively give because it's not your strengths. So I think it was like, it was just a mutually good thing for him to be using his strengths for like an action or to do that. So it all just kind of worked together. It was like just putting a puzzle together just made everyone happy.
Yeah, I think that kind of building on that is his approach to, like we said, action, learning by doing, getting out there. He was very engaged in the communities that he went in to kind of work and develop these programs. He lived in the conditions that they lived in, when he first went to Mexico. Then he was very engaged in the actual process of running the experiments. I think it was a scene in the film, it talked about that it was like, I don't remember exactly what time, but it was nighttime, and he wanted to go and check the trials, and someone was like, it's late. Why are we going this late at night? But he's like, well, we have the moon, so we still have some light to be able to use to check this. So just his commitment to wanting to be involved and take things head on definitely encourage those around him. Okay. How did his learning styles relate to drift?
I think a lot of times with the action learning style, like kind of thought process is like if you're not in the best fit, you just work through it. And so, I mean, you're continuing to use that style even if you're not using it to the best of your ability. And it kind of pushes you through it because that's your thought process is if you're doing it, then you're still getting things done. And the more you get things done, the more you're going to start to get it to your head. You're going to start to see like the end product inside, the light at the end of the tunnel.
For sure. And I think, can anybody think of an example with Borlaug from the film that kind of demonstrate that his desire to learn by doing maybe resulted in some area of kind of drift? And maybe not drift in the deepness of what we're talking about previously in the semester of just being completely lost. Yes.
I don't know if it's necessarily a class example because I feel like it doesn't figure out the type of him specifically necessarily, but like when he accepted the job and like had to pick up his family to move, like that was a big thing on them and like he was kind of the other home, and so like finding the time to like be with his kids and everything, like he never regretted the decision, like he liked doing that, but I think it kind of like took a toll on the family. Which is not really good, but like I think the family as a whole kind of like felt that like second guessing like this is the right thing to do.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I think kind of like when we kind of go way back to that content in the book of just that balance of family life and how that strain, that emotional strain that it can put on you. I mean, it didn't talk, like you said, a whole lot about him being stressed about it, more so his wife, which I guess she didn't really say it in a negative light, but the others who spoke about his wife said that they knew that it must have placed something on there. So yeah, you never know how that kind of responsibility and his role as a husband and a father could have impacted his leadership and that effectiveness and how clear he was to jump into it. One thing I thought about too from the chapter, sorry, not from the chapter, from the film, is when it was really late in his life. I think he was in his 70s, and they were talking about starting some projects in Africa. And obviously we've seen the pattern demonstrated in the film in his life of just jumping and doing things. So I think in his late age and trying to think of taking that same approach to jump and do something didn't seem as appealing to him. And he even expressed, like, I'm too old to be doing this. I don't think this is the time. But the other gentleman that would be partnering with him said, I'm 15 years older than you, so we should have started yesterday, so let's just start tomorrow. So I think that could have been an example of just a small piece of drift of that was affected by his action tactics because he was so used to just jumping in and giving it his all, but just becoming older, didn't see that being viable, especially on a brand new continent that he hadn't really done a large amount of work on. So change styles. So change styles are a lot of how you as a leader approach the idea of change and the concepts of change. So a conserver, that is someone who likes to kind of build upon the current systems that are in place. The pragmatists, they like to kind of take the perspective of like, okay, what's old, what's new, like basically what's going to be the most effective in how we build this up. And the originator is someone who likes new. They like something that's very new and maybe starting from scratch if that's necessary, but they are innovative in nature. So what do you think that Borlaug's preferred change style was and why?
I think that he was the pragmatist. I thought that he was kind of like that balance of both. I thought he was really flexible and adapting to his environment and being in with the experiments and stuff like you have to do because that's just a trial and error situation. So you have to really go with the flow.
Right. And even in how he approached, I don't know how many of you guys have taken tech change or diffusions of innovations, or not sure what the name of the course is, but it's based off of diffusions of innovation theory. And just his ability to not go into these communities and say, oh, you're doing it all wrong, you need to do it like this. But really trying to understand how they were doing it, understand the challenges they had, and then developing those strategies to improve from there. So I think that definitely demonstrates that pragmatic approach and not just wanting to go in and dismantle it, but wanting to try to take what's there and maybe improve it. Which I think if you've taken tech change, you know that that's a lot more effective in getting those to adopt that new innovation if you go in and try to understand the culture you're entering versus just trying to go in and tell them that everything needs to be shifted. Okay? So the experiences that you kind of go through in life shape who you are as a leader. So the development assignments, kind of different components of that, development assignments. Those are the assignments that you could be put on in the job or in class that really develop you maybe professionally, give you an opportunity to step, like if you run for an officer position in an organization, gives you that opportunity to be in a leadership role or in a specific role that develops other areas of your kind of leadership toolkit in your profile. So if it's communicating with others and you're needing to work on that, maybe there's been some kind of developmental assignment you've been given that would help you. I hope group assignments would be something that would help you with that. Then your career history talks about the diversity of career experiences and the depth of career experiences that you have, and how that shapes your perspective as a leader, how that shapes your approach to leadership, learning what you do like and what you don't like. All those things typically are learned on a deeper level when you get to experience different things. And then life experiences and those personal experiences. So the personal things that happen in your world, we talked about a little bit about this maybe a few weeks ago, how those personal experiences, those personal values that are derived from those experiences, how that can shape how you approach leadership. So this one, I'll talk about this one before we answer a question. It also in the chapter talks about 10 job challenges that commonly lead to executive learning. So just saying that if you have gone through some of these job challenges, that just elevates your learning, elevates you as a leader and your ability to kind of effectively lead under pressure. So when we look at this list of all these different things, new directions, inherited problems, problems with employees, high stakes, all those things, I think an example of someone that probably had to experience a multitude of those, especially if we look at kind of the height of the pandemic, when people, in the medical field, especially those maybe who were just entering the medical field during that time, having to experience all those types of things all at one time, and how that probably matured them as a leader and a professional. Kind of like I say, baptism by fire, just being thrusted into the severity of that situation and how that developed their executive learning. Does that make sense? It's kind of an example to see how going through those can just really kind of elevate you as a leader. Okay. So before we move on to the next area is number 5, experiences and lessons. So what job challenges did Norman Borlaug face that led to learning, and how did he learn from them?
I said when he first joined, I think he said the Rockefeller, that group, and they had to live in Mexico with those unclean water,
Yes.
working conditions, and he got really sick. I think that obviously he had to persevere through that to continue to do his work, and then he also realized what it was because he's absolutely living on a daily basis.
Absolutely. What decisions do you think contributed to Borlaug's career history? And maybe thinking about kind of in the film some examples of choices that he was presented with that ultimately led to the experiences he went through during his career. If that kind of makes it a little more clear in what that question's asking. I remember kind of how he was, how he ended up working in India. Anybody remember how that was kind of presented in the film?
I don't exactly remember how he got there, but wasn't India skeptical to adopt
His practice methods? Yeah, I think because it was obviously different role in kind of what he did out in Mexico, but I think it was just because a lot of the political climate that was going on during that time, because I can't remember who it just went into office here, but they were kind of frustrated with the position that some of the Indian leaders took on the war and all those things. So making the decision to kind of go over there, because like Borlaug talked a lot about the choices he made, that his choices weren't politically driven, but the people who are in leadership positions tend to make the choices about producing food essentially be politically driven. So Borlaug kind of discussed his perspective on how that shouldn't be what's driving the decisions on how people should be fed or not. What significant personal experiences did Borlaug have that shaped his leadership development?
Like with that one, I thought like about like the whole situation with his family, like put like not really straight, but like put a lot of big decisions on him, like trying to decide like what he should do with his life. I don't know, just kind of the impression, but like it was also significant because it shaped where he would go or what he was going to do with his future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we can see a couple examples throughout the film that talked about that. So before he got married to his wife, that was something that I think he expressed, that he wanted to have some kind of security before they took that step. And then I think another kind of thing that he did become aware of, I think a little hint that it talks about him becoming aware in the amount of time he was spending with his family, was when he started, when they credit him starting Little League baseball in Mexico. And that was an opportunity that he used to spend time with his son. So I think that kind of obviously developing that whole league and that component of that personal experience that kind of drove that interest certainly helped him in his leadership as well, especially if they're attributing that establishment to him and his efforts. So, derailment factors. These are the things that as a leader, if you allow these to get out of control and get in the way, this can really derail you from whatever it is your vision is, your personal, your leadership vision, all those things. This can derail you from those goals. So problems with interpersonal relationships, difficulty leading a team, difficulty changing or adopting, failure to meet business objectives, a narrow functional orientation. So those are the derailment factors that were discussed in the book. So during his lifetime, did Norman Borlaug experience any derailment factors that blocked his success?
I said no, like I obviously there were little things like here and there, like problems, but I didn't think there was really anything big that they mentioned. Like he's steadfast in his work, and he knew what he wanted to do and was able to even like I the scene at the kitchen table with his wife where she's like, "Are you coming home for dinner tonight?" And he's like, I don't know, can't answer that.
I know.
So, like, he even let that kind of stuff like get him off track, like he balanced everything pretty well. So I said no.
Right. So just kind of thinking back to especially the strengths that we've talked about, saying that, okay, maybe none of these really derailed his success he was able to be a world changer. Why do you think he was able to still be successful? Because, for instance, like you're saying, the red tape, the bureaucracy, he was not good at that, and getting paperwork turned in and all those things, that was not a strength. And no matter how much you want to change things, if you can't do that effectively or figure it out, then that can really affect your ability to be effective in programming efforts. So why do you think that he was in the position where these derailment factors and any areas that he was challenged with, specifically that one, maybe failure to meet business objectives, Why do you think that didn't derail him from being successful?
I think it had a lot to do with him being passionate about what he was doing. That he actually wanted to figure out how to get all the things turned in and deal with the bureaucracy enough so that he could get his changes pushed through and affect the world in a way that he wanted to.
Yeah. Definitely think his passion probably drove him there. Anything else you can think about from what we talked about in strengths that he probably utilized to ensure that his inability to, or interest to do paperwork would sink the whole ship? I think when we think back to teams and we talked about why it's important to understand your strengths, but why you also need to understand your weaknesses. That big reason we talked about was because if you understand, at least acknowledge your weaknesses, then you can bring on other team members that help you. I'm sure that woman in that film scene with him talking about the paperwork, I'm sure she definitely is on him. I mean, I don't know how many offices y'all have been around, and you see that administrative assistant. I mean, she's typically on whoever she's working for to ensure that those little things don't fall through the cracks and make a lot of those little things that seem like little things, but if they're not done, they become really big things, happen. So it could be that Borlaug was also cognizant of those weaknesses that he had, or those areas of leadership that maybe weren't his strongest, that he would position people around him to ensure that those weaknesses didn't sink the whole project. So just remember that all these things that we talk about are connected. So just kind of closing with this quote from Borlaug saying, "Yet food is something that is taken for granted by most world leaders, despite the fact that more than half of the population of the world is hungry." He talks about a scene in that film when he, witnessed a malnourished child, and just actually seeing a malnourished child and a child dying just simply from hunger. He just really said that people need to see it to really feel it and understand it. So, and I think especially here in America, it's not something that's just, in third world countries. There are plenty of children here in the States that go to bed hungry every night. So it's just sometimes a little bit easier to see it when you kind of are up close and personal with it. I mean, I even encourage you, if you've never been a part of an organization that gives food out to the homeless, it's definitely a humbling experience to see the gratitude that a lot of people say, oh, you give people who are homeless money or food, they're not going to want it. But a lot of my experience when we've actually delivered food to the homeless, they were very happy to receive it, very thankful to receive whatever it was we had. So I think it's very important to just really connect to some of the issues that you think are a little more disjointed and a little more far away than they really are. So any thoughts on Borlaug? I mean, he's a really interesting human. Okay. He's definitely one of the people that you can utilize. If you haven't in a past essay, you can utilize talking about him for your final essay. So you want to make sure you can give specific examples and details. So some things to remember. Number one, bring up your worksheets and submit those if you have them printed, or have them submitted to Canvas. From this point on, things are going to be just kind of shut down because we can't keep doing late work and all this kind of stuff at this point in the semester. So they're expected to be submitted on Canvas or in the class the day of that it's due. So essay 4 draft is due on Monday. When I get back to the office, I'll make sure that rubric is up to where you can see it. If you don't see it by this afternoon, shoot me a message or an email and say, hey, Courtney, I still don't see it, so I know, instead of waiting until 2 days before and saying you can't see it. Then it's like, okay, well, maybe you didn't want to see it. I don't know. So definitely, if you want some feedback from Erin, remember these essay drafts are optional, but if you want some feedback from her, turn it in by Monday, and then your final essay is due by next Thursday, and that's the last assignment of the semester. So I'm going to give you the assignment that you all will work on Thursday. So, as I mentioned, this will be our last overview, you're welcome, of Chapter 6, and we'll be focusing on our last leader of the chapter, which is Alice Paul. And you'll be learning about her in the film Iron-Jawed Angels, which focuses on women's suffrage. So you want to make sure you're getting the whole day Thursday to watch it. So there's no excuse to not come to class with some rich examples and be ready to discuss Alice Paul and her impact. Again, reading through these questions, it talks about the content that was covered in last week's lecture, about the impact, kind of that personal life impact on your professional life, and your professional life impact on your personal life. Looking at what impact did Alice Paul's work have on her personal life, what impact did Alice Paul's personal life have on her work, what were some of the costs of Alice Paul's leadership, what were some of the benefits, what strategies would you recommend for Alice Paul to be more balanced, what you've learned on personal realities, demands, and expectations. Was Paulus drifting or in the zone as a leader, and why? How would you summarize the personal realities, demands, and expectations affecting Alice Paul's leadership? So this will be our last person. Iron-Jawed Angels, remember that was on your syllabus, that you will have to probably rent that if you don't already have it. I think you can, it's on your syllabus where you can rent it. I don't want to get to telling you the wrong thing, but definitely review the syllabus to see where you can rent it. I think it's at least a 2-hour movie, so you want to make sure that you watch the entire film and bring this worksheet back to class or have it submitted on Canvas by Tuesday, because we will not come to class on Thursday and meet face-to-face at all. That will be your assignment, is to watch the film and complete this worksheet. Okay? Are there any questions? I'll get some sleep between now and then. I want you guys to be a little more robust in discussion when we come back Tuesday for one of our last classes. Okay? All right, well, y'all have a good rest of your day.